thank you all for being here. Thank you, Anthony, Will, all of you. I'm honored to be asked to come with you, an old fogey like me who's been around for too long, maybe. After all these brilliant speeches and presentations from Rita, the Canis brothers, Gabe, everything, so many perspectives in our service that it really leaves me speechless. Very little to add, except that all these perspectives are enriching parts of our lives. When Will and Anthony asked me to speak about this, I felt, what an honor, but also to talk about something that I hold very dear to me and to all of us, is the connective tissue in service. It goes back, of course, to a long, long time ago. And in my case, in my family, my parents opened a restaurant, La Grenouille, in 1962. But before that, way before that, it really started with, very simply, a trip to America for my father. The Canis brothers stole the thunder and the lightning by talking about the Statue of Liberty. It's bad enough that you have a Super Bowl team, and now that you're talking about the Netherlands beating Spain, but now you have to take the Statue of Liberty too. It's okay. But my father saw the Statue of Liberty in 1939 as he crossed the Atlantic with a great restaurateur, Henri Soulet, who opened the first great French restaurant in America at the World's Fair of 1939, Le Pavillon. My father came from a family of, cooks, restaurateurs, but he accidentally fell into it, as a lot of us do. Yes, we choose to do this. There comes a point when you realize it's a vocation more than a choice, and then you combine the vocation and the choice and the willingness and the intent, which is what Après, Vous is all about. Après, Vous it starts by opening the door. You open the door, you let people in, you open the door to your house, and that's after you. What you do when you make this gesture is you're underlining your intent, not only to your guests, but even more especially to the people who work with you. Because without the people who work with you, it's not a one-man show. Never has been, never will be. This great restaurateur I mentioned, Henri Soulet, when asked about what makes a great restaurant, back in those days, of course, you might think it was very different, but actually I think the ingredients are very much the same. 4 ingredients, he mentioned. I was lucky enough to meet him when I was 7, but he didn't say this to me back then, it wouldn't have registered. He said, to make a great restaurant, you need, of course, great food. You need great service, you need great decor, comfort, lighting, and last but not least, he said, you need great people. So let's go one by one. Great food, of course. Goes without saying. A client comes to your home, he expects not only to be coddled, to be well received, but one of the most important essential senses comes with survival. You need to eat, but you want to eat something that's pleasurable, inspiring, and that will get you to the table, which is really the most important piece of furniture in anyone's house. From the Caveman, I'm sure there was a stone and a hearth. It started with the table. And around that table is where you make the bonds of friends, people you work with, your family, your friends. It is essential. Then you have the service. Now, of course, food, you need to plan everything properly. There's a lot of quotes about failure, and I've known them firsthand because you make a lot of mistakes when you serve. The first time you serve, accidents happen, and you try to learn from your mistakes. And when you don't, then it means you're not learning. But the service issue that comes along with the food, because food requires so much planning and so much participation from the front and the back of the house, that then comes the services, and this is the part that is probably the most intangible of the 4 ingredients. It is actually, I think service is actually the mortar that holds the stones together in the house. You have great food, you have great atmosphere, beautiful service, somewhat beautiful but not attentive, and then you have people coming in, but they might not come back a second time. That's the key. So if you get the food done right, then the service, which is essential because it is linked with the food. It is how you present it. Then your next step, of course, Decor and Ambience, which I can tell you many stories about Decor and Ambience. Being as obsessed as my father was about lighting, I can tell you I'm just horrified to think that we're going to have to be living with LED lights, and I want to be the first person to invent a pretty LED light. But there are so many stories about lighting. My father, when I was in college in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, freshman year, he calls me in a panic. He says, "You have to help me, you have to help me." And I said, "What's the matter, Dad?" He says, "Well, there's a problem with this light bulb. This, General Electric doesn't make this light bulb anymore." And it was a very pale tint, peach color, flattering light bulb with silk lampshades around, and so you set the mood. It's essential. Lighting and how you look, how you feel are connected. I mean, you eat with your eyes first, okay? And what you see around you is what you're assimilating as your environment. So it is the first impact. Lighting is key. That light's very bright. And it's essential for the lighting to be right along with all the other details. If you're a painter, you understand that all the colors in the world will mean nothing if you change the lighting. So the lighting is key. So my father calls me in a panic and says, Charles, they changed the light bulb. You really have to help me. And so he's down to immediate solution up in the attic. He's painting these white light bulbs, right? And I'm saying, well, that's not going to work. It's going to flake off. He says, yes, I know. So I tell him, why don't you send me a sample? He sends me a sample of this light bulb, UPS, and this is way before, internet and all that. And I knew a kid in the dormitory. His father was vice president at Westinghouse across the Monongahela River in Pittsburgh. So I go over there with a light bulb, have long hair, and I'm just walking into this huge complex. And the man looks at me and says, yes, can I help you? I said, well, my dad needs these light bulbs, and he really needs them badly. And he's, of course, laughing. And I said, no, I'm serious. And he says, well, how many do you want? I said, well, what are the increments of orders? He said, well, minimum order 25,000. I said, fine. And then I think, wait a minute, 25,000, what if I order 50,000? Is the price? Yes, of course, it's lower. Okay, 50,000, we're on. I call my dad, he's elated, happy. I tell him it's 50,000 bulbs. Now I need, the American Express card and so forth, so we do it. We just do it. He and I thought the same way. In a month, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, these huge trucks pull up in front of 52nd Street, unload these crates, and my father's very happy, but my mother is not so happy. She says, what's this? And we didn't even have storage. We don't even have the basement there. So we had to find storage, of course, but worse yet was when she saw the bill, American Express, and she said, you two are crazy. And I think there is that craziness when you're in service as a passion, and the obstacles are just not there. You're just going to get there. The lighting is bad, you've got to fix it. Something happened in the dining room where you will have those days when clients may not be happy for whatever reason. This is your golden opportunity to turn it around. Take someone who's unhappy and prove to them how much this person is important and turn it around, and before you know it, you have the best of allies. I mean, you will actually get letters from clients who had a horrible experience, and it's happened. And you just keep getting letters saying, I will never forget how you handled it after. That is your opportunity. And it will happen. I don't care how perfect you think everything is going, there's always going to be a day, whether it's a full moon, whether it's just something went off or the computers went down, there's always going to be, because our business, which is really a vocation, is about so many details, so many fine details, that something is bound to happen because we're human, okay? I mean, we're not robots, not yet. So finally, that's the decor. The last, but not least ingredient, which Henri Soulet alluded to, was the people. And I think this is the ingredient that maybe we forget about it because we are so involved with what we do, that we are so obsessed with every minute detail, which we've just gone over, that we may just suddenly forget how important it is the perspective of the people who come, your guests. If you don't put yourself in the shoes of your guests, you will have no idea how it feels like to sit in your restaurant, and it's a different perspective that you have to embrace. Now, having said this, obviously, if you don't take care of the people, they don't come back, there's no party. No guests, no party, no guests, no restaurant. It's a very simple equation. It's brutally true for any restaurant. I don't care what level it is. The word restaurant itself invokes restore. So whether you open a pub, a bar, a restaurant, a bistro, a brasserie, whatever you call it, it's about restoring your senses. And what you're doing in a wall place, 4 walls. You're creating an oasis for all the senses, a theater for all the senses that evokes warmth, happiness, and you want to come back. One of the reasons why when I was running La Grenouille, I was never tempted, and I mean I'm old-fashioned, but I was never tempted in opening other places, is I thought the logic was if people come back 4 times a week to me, I don't have to open 4 places. Maybe that didn't work. But anyway, once you set the parameters of this oasis, then everything should really fall in place. And part of the oasis is the awareness that you have towards your guests, the awareness you have of other people around you, and really what inspires you is to realize that you are recreating a new restaurant every day. It's not like you open this restaurant and you get all these awards and people say what a great meal you had yesterday. That was yesterday, okay? Let's put the photo albums away and let's focus on what we're doing today. And in order to do that, it means complete awareness of all your senses, just like you want your guests to be aware of those. You have to be first and foremost aware of all those senses. You have to be aware, of course, of who you are. You can only be good to others if you're good to yourself. I mean, that's a basic rule. We were talking about rules earlier. If you're good to yourself and your staff, then they're going to project that goodness. And the people who come in will feel something's in the air. It's in the ether. You don't really know, or you can't quantify it. And service at that level is so good, it's so imperceptible, it's unseen, intangible, but you don't know what it is, but there's something in the air, and it's love. But it's also the power of intent. If you are really intent on serving the people because you are aware of all the ingredients in the kitchen, if you're aware of all the moves that will happen in service, that there is a cadence. I applaud Gabriel for his audacity to tell a burly guy to shave his armpits. I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, that's why I fall back on uniforms. I think it's a lot easier. But in the environment, I think that the environment you create can be inspiring if you take what is in the kitchen, the ingredients that change, along with beauty in the dining room. And for us, my father and I, painters at heart, it was very simple, flowers. The flowers were not floral decorations. They were not professional floral decorations. They were a reflection of a part of the garden. The garden is key. If you understand gardening, then there's a good chance, if you have a green thumb, and that you understand what is a season for turnips, what is a season for carrots, what is a season for morels, and lilac and peonies, there's a good chance that you're going to be connecting all these senses together, and you're going to inspire the senses for the nose, the ear, the mouth, the eyes. Everything is involved. And suddenly you're in this oasis, this theater that can be of calm and beauty at the same time. Baudelaire, the French painter, once talked about that nirvana, saying, tout n'est que luxe, calme et volupté, which means at the top, all is about luxury, calm, and voluptuousness. Now, the voluptuousness is really abundance of goodness, the wealth of flowers, great food, the abundance of just hospitality, basically. Baudelaire was a poet. There are a lot of poets and painters who love to eat because they are very sensitive. And in the realm of the restaurant, if you create an oasis where there's such beauty, where suddenly the waiters, the busboys, the customers ask you, what is that flower? And you tell them what it is. And you say, well, as a matter of fact, that's part of what our menu is about. There's a connective tissue between it all. So you're making everyone aware of this environment. And it's seamless. And it's also very pleasurable. It's a great way to start the day. I talk about recreating the restaurant every day. There's no better way to start than if you're in the kitchen cooking, or if you're doing the flowers while you're taking reservations. It's a morning ritual. And to me, it's a part of who I am, and the people who are with me who may never have ever thought twice about a flower or a vegetable or fruit or herb, never even knew what tarragon looked, smelled, or tasted like, suddenly they discover it. And that is very powerful. The power of discovery, discovering something new, is like seeing a child discover something. It is extraordinary. It's uplifting, and in means of uplifting, there is no better way to serve someone than to understand the humility and nobility of service. Humility of service, and don't read me wrong on this one. It's not being beneath someone, but you have to be under someone to push them up. First of all, if you try lifting them up, you're going to hurt your back. And secondly, you're going to get this kind of look from above, like, who do you think you are? You're here to serve me. It's about the customer, right? So you have to be in the customer's place and underneath, but not underneath with a bad connotation. It's just you have better leverage. You get to understand, you anticipate the customer's needs. You basically read the person's mind just by looking at what he or she is wearing. It's immediate perception. And with that, you can call it ESP if you want. I think some of us who are really good at this know exactly what you're going to have. A really good bartender sees someone walking in, he or she knows exactly what you're going to drink. It's proven. When you're serving from underneath, it is the nobility of service. And it is something that we're not really, it's kind of a foreign concept for us because we think in terms of equality and all that. That's great. But in terms of being able to perform something that is as sensual and evocative of beauty, you really have to, it's a different language. Equations, equality, numbers. Being under someone means that you are noble enough and humble enough to assume that role. And with the nobility comes knowing who you are, where you are, not feeling that you're in any way under, because remember, it's the hand that gives that's above the hand that receives. So you do have power. You have the power of changing that person's life. As that person walks into your restaurant, that person's day could be the worst day in his life or her day in life, and suddenly you change that customer's outlook on life. Life is beautiful again. That is a very powerful potion. And when you have that power, you remember that you are not the customer. You are in the customer's place, but you're not the customer. You can't cross that line. And that's how I feel. Those who do become friends of the customers, and that's I don't know, it's very different. You can become friends, but at the time when you're serving, you really have to respect those rules that the customer is here to enjoy him or herself, doesn't really want to know much about you while you're serving them, but maybe does. So therefore, the role for the server is to be there when it's needed, to not say or not do anything when you're not supposed to. Discretion, for instance. It's happened to me a few times. Faux pas. You open the door, you knock on the door, ladies' room, to check if everything's clean. I'm knocking on the men's door too, don't get me wrong. I knock on all the doors to check that everything's clean. Everyone's cleaning, but we all go in and make sure it's clean, that there's no tissues on the floor or anything. You can't scold your customers for being slobs. And so you just get there and you knock, and then you realize that maybe the woman who is inside is deaf. She didn't hear you. So, you're startled. You see this woman, so you just shut the door and say, "Excusez-moi, monsieur, I'm sorry, sir." This way, you were not seen. No, I didn't see a woman. I just shut the door. Right? I said, "I'm sorry, sir." Discretion is also, sometimes customers come in and they have all a history, and you have to know from the reservations that there's some people you can't sit too close to each other. There will be times when you really have to stand there and say, "This is not a good day to visit us." "Well, I don't understand. I have a reservation." No, you really do not want to have this reservation today. Someone's ex-wife, etc. An embarrassing scene. So you really have to cut it off right away. So that's the sort of the discretion that is intangible, but is existing and creates this environment. Part of that environment, as I said, is a garden. And the garden, curiously enough, is a word that in Aramaic, the word garden and paradise are the same. Paradise and garden are the same. Think about that. That's a message. It means that within the four walls, which is the definition of a garden, is a house. Within that house is a stove. Within that little room with a stove, there's a table. That is a house. There are people enjoying themselves, and they're cultivating the flowers, the vegetables, the fruits of their garden, which is the most noble, ancient thing you can do. Now, if you're sharing it, it's even more noble, because it's an experience that harks back to life. It's all about life. When my father first opened La Grenouille, in the beginnings, it was very rough. Formac à flores, vinyl settees, low acoustic tile ceiling. It was really, they didn't have money. It was complete insanity, to be honest with you, just what they did. And one of the things that bugged my father is when The light would come in, facing south. He would sit down, and you realize customers complain about the glare. There was no Olympic Tower or anything across the street, so the glare was just like this. And he said, I have to do something. And this was in the early days. And so he rushed out, and ironically, the very first luxurious item he bought for La Grenouille was a Baccarat vase. I mean, here it is. I mean, I'm now working for Baccarat. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. But the Baccarat vase was the very first thing that he bought and filled it with flowers. Thus began the tradition of flowers, to block the light in a beautiful way. First, he had put thicker curtains. The light wasn't right, not flattering. It wasn't pretty. It was a solution, but not a good solution. So he kept thinking, and when he did that bouquet of flowers, the flowers really grew all around. It was the oasis that kept blooming. And there are people who recognized this beauty. And one of them was an ancient client of his who used to follow him everywhere. He used to come in for lunch, dinner, practically every day when he was in New York. And after my father passed away, he still came in and repeated the same words that he told my father. He said, Monsieur Masson, you throw money out the windows, it comes back to you through the doors. The volupté, the excess. And that is part of the generosity of service. The generosity of service is a beautiful thing. And it's something to be shared, and it is, even though it may be intangible, it is very evident in the better of restaurants. And I thank you all for having me here today. Thank you.